Hey everybody, what is up? My name is Eric McGrew. Today we're going to be going over my new to me, it's a used saw, but it is a Husqvarna T536LIXP battery top handle saw. And this of course is like for climbers and top handle balance for trimming and that kind of stuff. And this is a used saw that I got from Levi Conrad, and he keeps his stuff in really good shape. So this saw runs really well as far as like starting and stopping and the batteries and all that. The batteries probably are about halfway through their life. I knew that when I got the saw, but I got such a good deal on it, it was totally worth it. The tree that I'm working here is just a small juniper single stem tree. It was probably around 16 or 18 inches at the base in diameter and probably 24 foot tall with the top in it. Now in this state of just a spar, it's probably 18 foot tall, so it's not a huge tree by any means. And the top area was probably where my first cut is right now, was about 6 inches in diameter, and I'm working my way down. This saw just cut phenomenally, and it did the whole job with no problem. I was afraid that the battery might die or whatever, because you just never know about battery life on stuff. And especially with juniper, if you're not familiar with this kind of juniper that we have out here, this juniper is super dense wood. It's tough wood. It's really bad on chains, and it kills them, and it bogs saws down. And it has inner growth where it's kind of gnarled over and things, and anywhere there's knots, it just really bogs a lot of saws down. My 193 saw from Steel has a hard time getting through this stuff, and that's with brand new chains on it. So I was worried about the power of the T536LIXP, but this thing was really simple to use. Only thing I noticed is that it does have a friction design in it where it gets to a certain amount of binding, it'll stop. And sometimes on the thicker sections of the juniper, when I was cutting through, I noticed that it would bog out on me a little bit when I was trying to make these snap cuts, and it got to where I would have to kind of unbind it so it'd go through, whereas my 193 probably would have kept going. I don't think that that's particularly a bad design. I just see it as one of the differences in design. Another thing that I noticed about this saw is how it has two hooks on the back. It has a hook for your lanyard to girth hitch through or be clipped onto, and then it also has another almost kind of like a U clip, which looks very similar to the quick clips that are coming out, and that works perfectly for hanging on my shim beaner. So I have one for the lanyard and another one for the shim beaner without having to use the ring on my lanyard, which can sometimes be too long when it hangs. So great saw. As you can see here, I got the saw down to about chest height on the stem, and I was working it down just to give it a bit more of a challenge, I guess you could say. And at 12 inch or so, it did fine, but once I got into the 14 to 16 inch area at the base trying to cut this stump down, it was a bit harder. It doesn't like, from what I can tell, to have the tip buried, whereas you might get kickback or whatnot on a 193 or a 200 or 201 or whatever, 355 or whatever you're using. This one here, it just really didn't care for that, and I had to end up going and get my Steel 291 to finish off the stump, and it just bogged down so much on the 536 LIXP that it was hard to get it to walk through the wood in a decent way. Now I can't express, if you've never cut this stuff, I just can't express how dense it is. It's very, very dense wood, and on top of that, it grows very weird. So it has a lot of cross grain and a lot of inner growth where bark and inclusions have been created with its growth time. So the 536 LIXP was just out of its element there, that's for sure. I didn't expect it to really be the saw for this. I do think my 193T would have gone through it with some work, but it would have gone through it easier than the 536. But the battery still didn't die. And then what I was able to do with it was I was able to go ahead and take that same piece of wood that I had just cut down, that little bit of a spar that was left, and I was able to go ahead and make it into a little testing cut area. And I just decided to kind of chop it up a little bit and see what would happen. And the result was that it still suffered a little bit in the ability to cut through such dense and thick, gnarly wood. But once again, that's not really what this saw is intended to do, right? I'm kind of putting it at the max of what I would possibly consider using this saw for. And so I just wanted to see how it would react. And the truth of the matter is that with this saw, unlike my 193, where I would just kind of start forcing it through thicker pieces of wood that were bigger in diameter than the length of my bar is. When it comes to this saw, I would not do that. I would definitely just send the saw down and get the 291 or something like that, instead of fighting with this saw when these stems get bigger than the diameter, or the diameter gets bigger than the length of the bar is. That being said, I guess that's relative too. So this is juniper. It would definitely respond differently to cottonwood or elm, I'm sure, than this would. Pines and that kind of stuff would also be a different story as well. So overall, I think the saw is a really good saw for what it is. If you're doing trimming and limbing, it's a great saw. I really, really like the balance of the saw. I love the fact that the safety trigger and the throttle trigger, if you want to call it that on this one, is very easily managed. It's not a funky way of grabbing the grip or anything. I like the battery life. I mean, I took down this whole 18-foot spar and cut it up into pieces with that one battery. The batteries fully dead take around 25 to 30 minutes to charge, and I, with climbing and all that, got much more than that in time out of the use of the saw. So if you have a plug, this thing should be able to continue to run cycling 2 batteries all day long. Depending on what you're doing, maybe 3 batteries. The one concern I do have with it is that some of the batteries seem to be a bit hard to find these days, so that's a bit disconcerting. Like tree stuff in them don't even sell them anymore. They do offer the saw, but not the batteries. And one good thing about this saw that I noticed is that it has metal dogs on it, which is something to be said, because even my 193T has plastic dogs. Here you can see that it's got the clips in the back that I've been mentioning. They're very, very handy, and it's very ergonomic in the hand, and the brake works well, the chain runs smoothly, oil seems to last well, and it just seems like a really good saw overall. So I'll keep you guys updated with things in the future.